never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life.
Hello, Rob.
Hello, Matt.
Man, I am really tired. I just got done with a long weekend of gaming with 30 or 40 players that I play regular D&D
your
with.
Regular group of 30 to 40 different people. Yeah, and how did it go?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I had a computer friend to help me along the way, and to help us with this episode, we welcome to the show Chase Carter of Rascal News. Chase, thanks for joining us.
Howdy, yeah, thanks for having me. I play with as few people as possible and no computers if I can help it.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the way.
This is, we're finally completing our collection of Rascals. Chase is here to talk with us. But the reason for this episode, and it's something that I feel very strongly about, Rob, but it is, I think, very important to the TTRPG community, is, of course, AI. And the thing to which Matt is alluding, or was alluding, is a statement that Christopher Cox, CEO of Hasbro, right? The whole thing?
Yes.
Said 2 weeks ago now. And I'm just going to read it because this is sort of like the fundamental part of this podcast. And then we can sort of like step back a little bit. But this is what he had to say. I'm probably more excited, though, about the playful elements of AI. And this is the sort of like the key point. He goes on to say that he regularly plays D&D with 30 or 40 people, and that there's not a single, this is quoting again, there's not a single person who doesn't use AI somehow for either campaign development or character development or story ideas. That's a clear signal that we need to be embracing it. So we'll come back to that, but hold that in your mind, listeners, as we delve onward.
Can you embrace an AI even if it's playful?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, have you seen Her? Like, that's
right.
the entire plot of Her is embracing an AI.
Embracing a playful AI. So
I gotta start growing a mustache like Joaquin Phoenix.
There's a lot about this that is confusing, frustrating, alarming, perhaps. This is not the first time that this podcast has talked about AI or AI generated things, and I want to like pause briefly to I don't know, to quibble, to define terms, because we're saying the word AI because that is what everybody calls the technologies in question, but they're not really artificial intelligence. They're not AI. They're in most cases some sophisticated form of machine learning or algorithmic sorting. ChatGPT is generative AI. Midjourney and other image generation tools are similar. They are not in any way artificial intelligence, and they sort of don't resemble that in any way, except you can ask it a question and it will talk to you back.
Yeah, they're just sort of like algorithms that churn as much information as possible, and then you input terms, and it sort of tries to give you what you want. It can simulate images or text or like now music and conversation, but it is not in any sort of way an artificial intelligence the way that sci-fi movies of the last 40 or 50 years, going back to like, Asimov and like the original robot stories would have us believe. They're operational tools, they're efficiency machines that just slurry as much human-made information as possible and condense it down into like the pink information sludge, sort of like a McDonald's chicken nugget.
Yes.
But I love
sludge.
McDonald's chicken nuggets.
I mean, the term of art for things created by AI in recent months has become slop. And I think that's a very, very good, useful term, because what is produced, whether it's visual or audio or written, is slop. It's just a slurry. And there have been smart people who have been tricked, and there are other people who push this because I think it's expedient to them. But these tools cannot think. They are not capable of thought, so calling them intelligence is incorrect. They can mimic things. They can generate. There's sort of, in many ways, very sophisticated autocompletes, right? They'll tell you with a great deal of sophistication, what might come next in a sentence. But do not be fooled, listeners, in case you somehow haven't figured this out already. They cannot think. They're not capable of independent decision-making or anything like that. If we are going to see general artificial intelligence or superintelligence or something, it will come from a different line of technology. It will not be ChatGPT gains sentience. It will be from something else. And I don't know what that is. I'm not seeing that kicking around anywhere. So
I'll just put my copy of the Orange Catholic Bible back on the shelf. Then,
yeah, that's right. There's no, we're not. Listen, the Butlerian Jihad is coming, but we're not there yet, Matt. You can stow that for a later day. Chase, you've written about this a bunch, and and I'm sorry because it's very annoying. But I want to get back to, I want to circle back around to what Chris Cox had to say, but you've been writing about this for months, and one of the interesting things that you have brought up in your recent articles is that the initial push for AI in Hasbro and in Wizards of the Coast is not actually starting out replacing artists and writers, but with other parts of the company, other parts of the supply chain, other parts of the process. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is something you are already seeing at a lot of companies. It's where the non-generative AI has existed for probably several years, depending on the company. When we talk about, say, large language models and stuff like that, these are tools that have been developed in the back end for software engineering and stuff to help those folks who keep websites running to do their job a little easier. And it's where the sort of more applicable use cases, I guess, and I'm going to put big scare quotes around that because that even depends who you talk to. It helps, say, software engineers replace large batches of code that would just be sort of monkey work hours, the sort of just jamming away at a keyboard doing relentless, tireless work. But even then, a lot of folks have said, and I've done this research, is that just puts in a place where errors can occur, these what you call hallucinations in any sort of generative AI. And if you have that in code that you didn't yourself type, and then something goes wrong, you're going to do the hours anyway to go back and try to find that and fix it anyway. So I'll just say up top that any sort of use case, even in these sort of back-end ones, still have all the same problems that we have with generative AI like Midjourney, ChatGPT, all these sort of things that are replacing creative technology. But yeah, Hasbro has this and is developing other versions of this. There was an article that they put out on VentureBeat back in August that were talking about 3 different use cases of generative AI and large language models that they had contracted a company called, what was it? It was Digital something. It was Google Cloud, and Datatonic was the other company.
Datatonic.
Datatonic. Yeah, really
what
sort
a
of
dumb name. Come on.
Listen, I mean, there's only so many of these contracted companies. I think they run out of 2 nouns to smash together at some time.
Yeah.
But the 3 different ways that they wanted to do this is one, and this is all this is a sponsored article in VentureBeat that you can go look at, and we can talk about what it means to have sponsored articles because that gets into my article a little bit. One of them was to just take a lot of information and turn it into applicable packages for the C-suite suits who don't exactly know how numbers work on the back end, but they can take these numbers and then sort of understand them in layman's terms and then take them to shareholders and be like, oh, yes, our guys down in the lab, down in the computer lab have given me these numbers and they mean things. So that was one use. Another one is I talked about just engineer productivity, which is I think the most mundane and probably maybe useful ? Of these terms. And then the third one they talked about was creating a tool to help teach newcomers Magic the Gathering, probably through Magic Arena, their digital, because that's where they get a lot of their new players. And that's also where they have their transactions, their microtransactions. So that is where it's going to be most useful to bring in new players. So sort of a help tool, a sort of Siri or Google Assistant or all of those AI assistants that they're putting in Google Docs and all these other programs that they're sort of getting shoved down. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's just do you want to use our AI assistant? I'm like, no, I don't. But they want to develop one of those.
It's in Adobe Reader. It's in, it's every time I open a PDF, it's do you want me to summarize this? And I'm like, no, I don't. I would like to read it. Please go away. It's very annoying. Everything you've said is absolutely correct. And part of why I'm so cranky and so agitated about AI is that before I was no longer in this industry, but last year for a while I had worked in SEO, and SEO was
I'm sorry.
No, it's bad. It's a terrible industry. I hope it dies. Google is dying, which means SEO will probably die, which will be good for everybody. But like a lot of what I did was just tweaking like HTML, like metadata, very, very dull, very rote, across like thousands of web pages. And you would think this would be a perfect use case for AI. And I tried really hard when it was still coming out. I spent a lot of time working on it at my small company, trying to like see if we could like make this work because my bosses were very excited about it. And it was terrible for it. Like exactly what you said, there's no way to guarantee accuracy. So you're going to put in the hours doing the editing, doing the QA, no matter what. They keep telling us that it's going to get more accurate. You're going to be able to like use it more securely, but they haven't gotten rid of hallucinations. They haven't made it to the point where you can trust it to do what you were asking it to do. Maybe it will get there, but like I have seen no evidence that this technology is capable of doing the very like obvious things that it should be able to do, much less do anything creative or innovative or interesting.
This is one of the big problems with like the adoption of AI is that a lot of these Silicon Valley types that are sort of creating this, and then of course the venture capitalists that are pouring, I think at last estimate back in July was like over $1 trillion of investment already into this industry. They want you to adopt it now, and then they say, well, it'll get better down the line. And in the meantime, we're just supposed to accept the problems, the hallucinations, which can be on one end, like whenever Google search results are telling you, yeah, there's a minimal amount of rocks you can eat every day. But then on the other side, there's like real problems where like insurance companies are using AI and they're denying people's insurance claims because they're using AI to do it. This is impacting people's lives in real material ways. We shouldn't accept this technology even if it has like a 2 to like 0.5% hallucination rate. That's damning.
That's very high. And that's a level of error that we wouldn't accept from just about anything else. And it's
right.
It is often compared, again, by its boosters, not by anybody who knows anything, to the internet, right? Like, the internet, people didn't get it right away. It took a long time to catch on, but like the use cases for the internet were immediately obvious, and people immediately used the internet to do all kinds of things. Some not for profit, just because they were like, the internet is cool. Yeah. There is, if we were not being force-fed ChatGPT and AI in every single app, I don't know that there would be a lot of adoption for it, because after the initial novelty of being able to ask it a question and get like an amusing answer or generate like a funny image, I don't know that anybody would want to use this. It's a neat toy.
Now that I can no longer make a picture of SpongeBob SquarePants flying a plane on 9/11. Yeah. There's not. There feels like less reason. What? So if I'm as the outsider in this conversation, if I'm understanding the two of you correctly, it sounds like capital is always chasing the highest rate of return, and that a bunch of Silicon Valley people have promised extremely high rates of productivity growth and economic growth that will be caused by AI eventually, and so every publicly invested, traded company has to get on this, or they feel like they're going to be left behind.
Yeah, it's the fear of missing out on those gains, and then the shareholders come back and say, why didn't you do this? And then Hasbro, a company that's already struggling, if it wasn't for Wizards of the Coast as the only breadwinner for Hasbro, they would sort of just have to hold out their hands and go, like, sorry, we're stupid. Like, I think for Chris Cox and a lot of people, this is a must, like, this is a necessary thing. And he's spinning it in all of his interviews, including that one at the Goldman Sachs Communicopia, whatever. He is very much trotting out a lot of this sort of language. Yeah, God.
Communicopia and technology conference.
Great time there.
So the swag bags were real.
This is like for Hasbro. It sounds like what you're saying is this might be like a do or die gamble. Otherwise, they're not going to see the same like rate of stock growth that they've seen over the past couple of years, or profit growth.
Yeah, because they'd already sold off E1, their entertainment branch, which was responsible for like producing and making all of the movies throughout the 2000s, like the Transformers and the G.I. Joes and stuff like that. But that was sort of the baby of the former CEO that came before Chris Cox, who I'm blanking on his name right now. But he was a film producer and sort of really spun that up. And Chris Cox tried that, and it just hasn't really worked out, mostly because of Marvel, I think. Like, they came too late trying to jump on the Marvel train. So they liquidated that because it was costing them a lot of money. And they still need to make up money because toy sales through the last 3 years, as the U.S. has sort of flirted with recession over and over again, if people are struggling to pay rent and groceries, they are not going to be buying Play-Doh and Nerf guns. So Hasbro has to bet big, and strapping AI to Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering and sort of squeezing more blood from that rock is their big bet.
Yeah, and well, Matt, you make a really good point, and I wanted to save my capitalism crankery for the end but like it really is like they are chasing higher and better returns, and everybody with money sees a hockey stick graph attached to AI. It doesn't matter. There's no actual use case. No company is profitable. It doesn't matter. The stocks are going up. Nvidia is through the fucking roof, mostly through
until they're not.
Until not. Sorry. Like I said, this is in my opinion, this is a bubble. But boy, there's a lot of bubbles that continue to bubble. In my town, Portland, Intel just laid off thousands of people.
Yeah.
Not because of any core business inefficiency, but because they failed to capitalize quickly enough on the AI wave, right? Like the perception is among investors that Intel sort of missed the boat. And so they laid off a shit ton of people. And that's happening all over all sorts of industries. Anybody who could, any company that can conceivably be, somehow integrated with AI, if they are not doing it, it is, it looks bad. It has the potential to cause serious financial detriments.
Yeah. Which now with Nvidia being as big as it is, I think it has a sort of a whale crashing into a boat. If it fails, we're definitely heading into a recession because they're just so big. They will take down our imaginary money market with them.
Yeah, it is an extremely concerning situation because there's no, I don't know, I'm just some idiot, but it really does seem pretty obvious that Nvidia and Tesla and a bunch of other extremely highly valued companies are overvalued and have been for a long time, and we're just sort of just pumping money right at it. But I'm not an economist. I don't know anything.
Well, this is really dismal. Hopefully, it won't have any effect on things that are not dismal that make me happy, like tabletop role playing games. What Chase? What's coming down the pike here in your because I just from my own perspective, okay, last year, Wizards got caught by every Reddit user on the planet putting out a bunch of AI generated art in I think it was Big B's Glory of Giants. It was a weird titled book.
Yes.
And everyone was very unhappy about that. But that was last year, and this is this year. What's the move, you think?
Yeah, they're not going to be doing it in the art and design. There have been too many snafus and almost mess ups. This happened multiple times in Magic the Gathering as well. In some advertisements, largely the Lara Croft Secret Lair, there was that, and then a couple of contracted artists, which is the easiest one for them because they can be we didn't know, we cut ties. And that's obviously what you're going to see from the D&D side with any sort of artwork is we commission all our artists. So if someone sort of slips through the cracks, we're just going to immediately cut contact. They can't work with us anymore. But you're right. If someone from the outsider, if you blessedly knew nothing about AI and was just how is AI going to get into tabletop games? It's going to be through D&D Beyond, which is the main monetizing force for Wizards of the Coast and thus Hasbro. They're really trying to juice that marketplace, and in probably the next year, it's been about a year since they acquired D&D Beyond, and I think they're really starting to put in the background some works on turning that into a major marketplace for this next decade of D&D under the new 2024. Just an aside, I saw someone calling it today 5th edition, 2nd edition, and I just
I like that.
I both love and hate that. This is sort of it really is just sort of putting it right in your face. But anyway, yeah, D&D Beyond is going to be a major marketplace, and I think they're going to probably implement a lot of generative AI powered tools onto D&D Beyond, either through a subscription service that they might in the future put out, or otherwise just a tool you can use to say, create character prompts. You put in a name or you put in some details and it just in a second throws you out a rogue with a really dark backstory. Or you could put in a generative prompt for an adventure, and it throws out a homebrew adventure for that night in 5 seconds. Because Chris Cox has said, both at Communicopia and in a VentureBeat article from earlier this year, that he's really eager to feed the back catalog of D&D, all of the official works, into that slurry machine and strap it to an AI cash flow.
So this brings us back to Cox's comments and one of the things that I kind of wanted to drill down on, because they're fascinating in a way that I don't think he intended. So first of all, do we believe that Chris Cox plays D&D regularly with 30 or 40 people? How on the on the bullshit scale, where do we rate that?
Oh yeah, high bullshit. That's a made up number. And my question is like whether that was in the script and someone was just like, yeah, that's a normal number. It's sort of like a Lucille Bluth, like, what does a banana cost, Michael?
Yeah, that's right. How many people are in a D&D game? Yeah. 30, 40?
40? Yeah. It's either that or like if you listen to the conference, he sort of like stumbles over his words and he's sort of like caught flat-footed as he sort of put their like three-pronged approach into play. And I wonder if he just is like ad-libbing like the worst like freshman improver that you've ever seen and just throws out 30 to 40 and his brain goes, that's stupid. You can't follow that up. No matter. Keep going. Keep thinking.
I mean, I regularly play with about 6 people, I think. And that's using a very broad definition of regularly. And I have a podcast about this hobby. So like I think at my peak, maybe 10, 12.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous on the face of it. The second part though.
Yeah. The second part's ridiculous too. I mean, I don't know, I haven't actually polled my players, but everyone using AI, my players don't do anything between sessions. They show up and they're like, hey, let's remember what happened last time and then go from there. That's good in my opinion. But this is also very strange. I don't know where he's getting this number from or this perception from. I guess if I had to guess, I would say people like us, game masters, dungeon masters, are more likely to use this because they need art, they need a prompt. But even then, it's very strange.
I have one player who I think used ChatGPT when it was brand new to come up with a list of names for like her contacts in Cyberpunk or something. And I don't know that she has ever used it ever since. I think it was a pure novelty thing. So that is possibly one person out of the, everybody I play with. And that was me trying very hard to be charitable to this thought. I guess maybe we have to remember that everything that Chris Cox says is for investors. He doesn't care about us or his players or the game or really even the company. He just cares about investment. So I have to assume that this probably sounds plausible if you're a money guy. And that would explain why he said it.
Yeah, I think if we step back and we look at who he's talking to and why he's saying that, like Goldman Sachs is a company that I think 2 months ago, put out a big comprehensive report saying that, while some of our members are cautiously optimistic about AI, takes too much money for too little returns to be an actual good investment. And so he's really motivated to convince them at their sort of biased, Communicopia event that it's worth it. And so 30 to 40 people is a fairly good sample size for an opinion such as, my players use ChatGPT and AI. And so if you just take that one quote, and then also people in the know will say this is ridiculous on its face, they will report it out. And all of a sudden, the soundbite of a fairly good sample size of people using AI is out into the wild. And the AI people who are already sympathetic will go, actually, that's pretty good. If I just avoid the naysayers, he's got a point. Maybe I will invest in this. It's for the right people. It's not really for us.
It's not for us. That's a good point. I remember this report that Goldman Sachs put out, which was, not encouraging. They were saying this is too expensive. We don't see the profit in it. It's not going to yield returns quickly enough. So obviously, yeah, he would want to dispel that notion, which sort of, there's a lot of reasons why I don't think that using AI is good for games, why you should do it, why anyone should do it, why it should be integrated in Wizards of the Coast. And I want to talk us about the creative part of that in a minute. But like, just from like a practical standpoint, I think this is a really like, this is a dangerous path to be going down. Right now, we can all use ChatGPT and Midjourney and a bunch of other things for cheap or free because they are being heavily subsidized by investor capital, by venture capital and just Microsoft and whoever else. If they ever intend to become profitable, and they do, it's not a charity, it is going to get more expensive. It might get a lot more expensive. This is the thing that kind of like blows my mind about every company that's embracing it. I'm like, this tool costs whatever right now, but like, how much is it going to cost you a year from now if you actually become dependent upon this, ChatGPT instance? Like, are you going to be able to afford it? Are you going to be able to like retool your workflows? Like, I am waiting for, the other shoe to drop on like the price increases, because it just does. It's right now, it's very, very inexpensive to use, but it will not stay that way. And that just seems like an extremely risky thing to do. And if I were the type of GM to use it, I would be very wary about making this a core part of my like planning process, because what if tomorrow it's $100 a month instead of $20?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And I think like what we're going to see with Hasbro is I'm still waiting for like the D&D Beyond subscription to come out and what all that's going to entail. And I think a lot of that's going to be wrapped up into the subscription cost. The other way that they might go if they don't do subs is going to be microtransactions, because something that Hasbro really, really does well, to be honest, if I'm going to give them any sort of credit as a sort of business, is that they do have a lot of stuff to license, and they do a fairly good job licensing that stuff. Mm-hmm. Transformers, if you're talking about like non-Hasbro stuff, Peppa Pig and Transformers is like their big money makers. It's funny to us, but
no.
Damn,
I believe
all
it.
hail
I believe
the pig.
This is a very funny company. We love that we are so enmeshed with this very weird company. It's a very funny company.
Yeah, and I don't know if either of you are Magic the Gathering players, but like over the last couple of years, Magic the Gathering has sort of been, players at least have been fighting a losing battle against Universes Beyond, which is the way that a lot of outside licensed IP is beginning to creep.
I am one of those. I am one of those players. I'm a hater of Universes Beyond.
Oh, Rob, 2025 is going to be bad for us. This is going to be the Marvel year.
I know.
I
know.
Yep. So this is going to be the way that I think D&D Beyond probably makes a lot of money off of these tools, is going to be through license deals to sell, say, I don't know, like cosmetic packs, item packs, adventures that are licensed off of Marvel or The Witcher or whatever other like fantasy property gets a new series on Amazon that year. They really want that pipeline to be in. And so I think probably what we'll see is players are not going to be monetized towards using the ChatGPT services, but it will be a tool that they'll put in that tool belt to make whatever subscription or microtransactions that much more enticing to the general public.
That makes sense.
So, I guess, I mean, we don't really know, but since you're meshed in this, I guess what you're describing to me is, okay, they take their back catalog of published adventures, some of them brilliant, many of them very mediocre, and put it through the large language thresher. And then you, as the dungeon master with your AI D&D Beyond subscription, say, give me an adventure that does X, and then it gives it to you, and you either pay for it as part of your subscription, or I don't know, you pay $5 after like seeing a preview to buy it. I guess that I can see a lot of people being interested in that, like as dungeon masters. I guess the thing that would make me very cautious is like, if that worked, why don't people like already just play with ChatGPT as their dungeon master? Like if that's what people actually wanted, right? Why haven't we already been sold an AI generated prompt or adventure that you can play? We haven't, because they probably suck.
Yeah. And I think what we'll probably wait to see that is whenever the VTT comes out, the officially licensed one, not Project Sigil, because that's different. That is a different thing. But whatever sort of virtual tabletop is going to have a built-in, it might even be a premium feature that you have to pay $5 or $10 a month for to offset the costs to Hasbro, and then make them a little dosh on the side to use their like virtual DM, because I think it's gone down like throughout the entirety of 2020 or 2014 D&D. it's been really hard to sell things to DMs. They buy the books and they'll probably buy the adventures, and that's probably it. A lot of the official merchandise, the dice bags, all that, that's players. They have players locked down. But if they can just sort of replace the DM completely for virtual players, I think they absolutely would. And I think within the virtual tabletop, with a lot of the sort of like set dressing and the miniatures and the backgrounds, is how you hide how shitty those adventures really going to be. You dazzle them with with the sets.
This is an aside.
It makes me feel good that I'm the wrench in the works of some capitalist
they hate
plan.
us. They hate that you have to have a GM to play. That it makes them so mad. It gets in the way of their profit margin. Sorry, this is an aside, but I want to pick your brain a little bit about the VTT, because I am a tinfoil hat guy about this VTT. I have been living in dread and fear, and everywhere I look, I see it's slouching towards Bethlehem to be born. Like, what do you think? They've been talking about it for a long time, but like, do you think? Here's the thing: they've tried stuff like this before and failed. So like, half of me expects that it's just gonna like die on the vine. But like, what do you think is coming down the line with the VTT? Because are they really gonna try to do a GM-less system, or like or GM-less adventures? Because they talked about it and they've been real quiet about it in recent months.
If it wasn't for Baldur's Gate 3, I would have said probably not. I think they're going to try to bottle that Baldur's Gate 3 license any way they can. Larian doesn't want to work with them anymore, and it's going to be 4 or 5 years before whatever studio they're partnering with is going to create another one. I think that like sci-fi one is going to be a completely different ballgame. That's whatever. So I think that they're going to develop it in-house. They're going to try to make the virtual tabletop as close to that Baldur's Gate 3 experience as possible, which you don't need a GM for. That's what computer RPGs are all about. It's like the computer, your CPU takes the place of the GM. You're not needed. So yeah, I think they're really, really going to try to do that, because they looked at the sales numbers for Baldur's Gate 3 and they go, those could be Hasbro customers.
That could be Hasbro money. Yeah.
Yeah, they could be playing. You could use a generative AI to make your own Baldur's Gate 3, and you can put Astarion and Karlach, because we own those properties. That's and you can have all the Astarion adventures you want by putting in prompts. I think that's genuinely and like, with a lot of things with Hasbro, you're right. It could die on the vine. It might be 3 years from now, and then we never hear of it again, because internally it's just sort of failed. But they're working on it right now. I'd bet hard money on that.
Have they ever just considered, I don't know, making something that is good and nice and doesn't suck to make the money? Like, it's just what a strange approach. Like, oh wow, this video game that had incredible acting and story was really popular. What if we photocopied that and ran it through a blender?
And then did it worse.
Let you digitally torture Karlach in a generated AI room, right? And give them a new skin or something. I don't know.
This gets to like sort of like the big picture thing, which we've kind of been dancing around, and I have strong feelings about art and about the game that we play and about, the experience of being a player and a GM. And I find, not to use too extreme language here, but, the idea of using ChatGPT to do any of that, to create art, inhuman, unholy, like truly abhorrent. I find it to be like one of the most personally offensive ideas I have ever encountered. So the thing that really, really bothers me about this is the idea that we should want ChatGPT or AI in any way to replace any part of the creative process. This is the thing that sort of like really, really like sticks in my craw, because like I do need help with certain aspects of being a GM. Like there's a lot. I'm not great at drawing maps. Certain rules I would really love. Here's the thing. I wish they had made a better index before they started implementing, ChatGPT. Like, there's lots of things that they could help me with that I would pay them money for. But the thing that I don't need help with is ideas. Like, I don't really know like why I would want a machine to help me come up with story ideas or character ideas or whatever, or campaign development. I am overflowing with those. I don't know why. Like, if you aren't, you probably don't want to play these games. I wish I weren't sometimes. I could get into sports. I don't know. Like it's like that's not something that I like need a tool to help me with. And I'm, it feels like the kind of thing that only somebody who like doesn't care about art or play or any of these games would say. It's totally bewildering to me.
I think they're going to position whatever tools they come out to help DMs as a sort of really helpful thing for the sort of harried DM, the people who, I mean, because let's admit it, like culturally, I think, I'm going to paint with a broad brush here. A lot of players look to their DMs and expect far too much out of them.
Agreed. Correct.
Me and Rowan were actually just talking about this for a story that she's working on, where like the sort of like labor that is perceived from a DM to make a game happen is wild. I don't understand. And D&D, especially with like the new book, we haven't seen like the new Dungeon Master Guide, but I don't think that book is going to do any sort of work to sort of redistribute that labor amongst the players and not the DM. But instead, they could sell you tools that I think to a DM that runs a weekly game and cannot homebrew another 7 hours of content for their group, they're going to look to that and go, oh shit, yeah, I can get my laundry done if I just use this. And I can't really fault someone for maybe doing that. I think general public, if you're not aware of the sort of like wild, like ecological cost of AI, the way it's going to be replacing jobs, you're going to say, this just lets me like actually play and enjoy this game and then get my chores done as well. And Hasbro will make $5 to $10 a month off of each one of those people.
Instead of fixing the rules to, yes, make the creative process work more equitably, which many game systems has done, what if we made them worse, but then sold you a thing to fix them? Okay, I can see how that's that's a way to go.
This is absolutely a valid concern, and Matt and I have this is much of what our podcast does is help people work through this problem, because it is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And depending on the system and depending on your players and like what you want to do, it's a lot of work. If I thought that it would be helpful, I would be interested in this type of tool. I really don't see how it could actually help with the really like critical parts. But you're right though, that if you're not as informed as we are about like what it actually does, about the costs, both like financial and ecological, then it would be appealing to you to have something to be able to generate, ideas or a campaign or whatever. And that's, it's kind of nasty. This is kind of sucks that like, rather than make the game, and this is an enduring problem with Dungeons and Dragons, is that it is hard to GM comparatively. Like it is one of, I've GM'd dozens of systems at this point, and I don't think any of them are actually as hard as Dungeons and Dragons, or very few are. And I've DM'd some complicated ones because it's not that the system is so complicated. It's just designed, poorly in that way. It doesn't lend itself. We do have to wait to see what the new DMG has in it, but I am with you. I do not think it is actually going to redistribute any of that work as much as we might hope that it would.
Yeah, and we do have to keep in mind here that that D&D is very popular, well beyond like the very online, very in the hobby crowd that all three of us probably are, and that generally speaking, for a lot of people, D&D is the game that my dad played and then gave me his books, or it's the game that Critical Role plays, and I listen to Critical Role and a couple other shows, or they are just generally in the orbit of D&D, and that is their entire sort of understanding of tabletop. And so their entire understanding of facilitating a role-playing game is the labor, the sort of creative labor that GMs have to take on. They don't know another way. And so they can't sort of like imagine any other way of approaching the table other than being the DM that does 18 hours of prep work.
That's a really good point. We get letters like this sometimes, and we've talked about it, but like it is the Dungeons and Dragons style of GMing is to many people, like that's what it means to be a GM. It means that you are creating the world. It means that you're adversarial. It means all of these things that are not actually like fundamental to the role of being a GM. And I guess like that's what's frustrating is a company or a CEO that really cared about the hobby, that cared about the game, would instead try to make it so that it isn't those things, so that it isn't so laborious, so that it is more of a joy to GM. but instead they're going to sell us a slop robot to, push things out.
Yeah, and Chris Cox has sort of like fashioned himself. I wrote about this several months ago. Like Chris Cox has fashioned himself as like the player CEO. Like, oh, he grew up on these games. Like he played D&D as a youngster and like really loved this company and loved this game. And it's like, maybe, I'm not going to say he didn't, but as in a role as CEO, he doesn't answer to the players and he doesn't have their best interest in mind. Like he's the CEO of a publicly traded company. He answers to the shareholders. And the shareholders are looking for Hasbro to make quarterly profit because they are deep in the hole.
Chase, 2 questions, speaking of Wizards and their public stance for you, is we have seen, I think, 2 or 3 times from Wizards, and if you're one of those players who is, not online like the 3 of us, you've probably maybe seen these because they post them on D&D Beyond and stuff, where they say, hey, we've updated our AI policy. No AI art, no AI adventures, and they keep saying that. And I think a lot of other companies have said that too. Like, what's going on there, and how do we square that with what you've been telling us and reporting on?
They can work in tandem, like because Wizards of the Coast design team are wholly separate, at least in what they do day to day, from Hasbro as a company. Like Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast and does give them like probably general directives, but Cynthia Williams, who was, and now it's Mike. I'm blinking on his last name, but Mike Hain, the new CEO who stepped up. Mike Height is his name. There we go. I pulled it out.
He stepped up.
Yeah. So like the design teams just operate wholly separate from them, and they have their own sort of like demands. They have minimal power as far as like what they can enforce, but after 2023, which had multiple major foibles for Wizards of the Coast, they realized that using generative AI to produce art, any sort of like creative artwork or writing in their books, would lose them more public goodwill than the sort of like labor saving costs would give them. And that's sort of like fed on the fact that whenever generative AI was getting a lot of this initial like venture capital funding, artists across all mediums like came out and said like, hey, this sucks. They're stealing my artwork. I can't get any money off of this. And so culturally, we did have a pushback on this is stealing from artists. And so that has helped the design teams, whether that's the people creating the artwork, the layout, the writing within the books, most of like the designers creating the rules and stuff like that. They have had a little bit more ammunition to push back and say, no, we are going to have these guidelines and you can't really push on these. Which is why in my article I wrote that Hasbro has sort of ceded that front and said like, yeah, you're probably right, but we can come at you from every other direction.
Okay, well, what about, I think I've seen something similar, a similar statement from Paizo, from Cobalt Press, from Roll20, like, oh, hey, no AI art on our books, no AI text on our marketplace, drive-through RPG, everything that has AI art and text has to be labeled. What are like, what's like everyone else in the industry's like position on this? And are they also, do you think, planning something similar, or are they maybe being a little more sincere because they don't have the tools to do these other types of things?
I think that's exactly it. Yeah, I don't think they have like, these tools are easy to use, but like Rob was saying, once you get to the point where like it's not being subsidized by all of this sort of like venture capital, they have to pay for it somehow. And so they're either going to raise their rates or pay out of pocket. And I think everyone's probably aware, if you're not Wizards of the Coast, the margins on profit within the tabletop industry are razor thin. They don't have the wiggle room to put this sort of really expensive technology or even pass it on to their players, to their consumers. And so it is, and I don't want to take away from like, these folks making this stance. I think it's good and right that they're saying they're not going to use this technology. It's also a very easy thing to say right now because one, I genuinely don't believe that they probably have the means to implement this. It also puts them in opposition to Wizards of the Coast. And if you can stand up and be like, I'm not that bully, that's free goodwill, baby. That's an easy win. Of course they would do it. And again, not to take away, but like I think it is a really smart move for Cobalt Press, for Paizo, for I think just today Chaosium to come out and say it. Now again, these are not like Hasbro, these are not policies. This is not a sort of like on their webpage, a statement that you can, or that I as a journalist can go back and cite and be like, hey, you're doing this thing, but you said this 3 months earlier. What's the deal with that? It is a public statement. So again, like, it's good. In the long term, it amounts to not much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the point, and many people, I think, like me, would pay extra to know there was no AI involved in a thing that I was purchasing. I don't like it. I don't like the way that the art looks, it's obviously exploitative. Yeah, we kind of like glossed over this because there's so many things wrong with it, but like, it is inherently exploitative because these are all trained on huge masses of data, information, often art that has not been, the artists have not been compensated for, writing that the writers were not compensated for, just huge bodies of work that they just throw into the slot machine. And that is, that actually reminds me of a question that I had. I don't know if I like hallucinated this or something, but like, have they sold the D&D Beyond data? Like, there's a whole bunch of like character profiles and campaigns and stuff on D&D Beyond. Like, is that being used for Gen AI slop? Did I hallucinate that? It feels like the kind of thing that they would do.
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's going to be something that people continue to ask. I think what Chris Cox has said publicly is that they're going to use D&D's official catalog, which I think, at least by that, does not explicitly include things that are created on D&D Beyond or DM's Guild. Now, I think all of us know that like any of that stuff is sort of proprietary to Wizards, at least because of like at the time before 2023, the OGL. Afterwards, a little bit more squidgy, but yeah, I don't think it does. But we've seen plenty of reports of these AI companies say one thing and then be taking all of this and just sort of like very frantically shoving it in so that they can just sort of say, oh, from this point forward, we will not use any of this stuff. So I think it's probably safe, just given the way the technology has been used, that probably, but yeah, nothing explicitly said so far about D&D Beyond stuff.
Yeah, I've sort of resigned myself to this. Reddit sold all of their comments at some point in the past few months. And listen, if Microsoft wants to pay for 12 years of my shit posts, that's fine. It'll make their chat GPT worse. I think that's they deserve what they get. And like, I don't have anything big on D&D Beyond, but yeah, another betrayal and like a long list of having your words and data be sold without your consent.
I think my other question was like about like really indie creators. Like, so I tried to see like, are there a lot of indie creators, using AI art, AI to write things? I think it's kind of like what you were saying, right? People who support indie creators are also the people who care passionately about things being made by humans. But I did find on DriveThruRPG a handful of books that had sold more than 100 copies that used AI art. And then, of course, thousands that have almost no sales that are just, art compiled and shoved in there. And then I did find one mapping software program that touts its AI art capabilities, Dungeon Alchemist. It does not seem to be very popular in that you have to, install it as a program, which is a big barrier to entry, but that's its big selling point, AI.
Yeah, I think we saw initially like a wave of artists within the indie community really jump on this, because it's a constant conversation within like indie publishers is like, artwork will sell a game, but also artwork is expensive. Yeah. Contracting artists is, for folks who like the difference between a $3,000 game and a $5,000 like Kickstarter is like make or break. A lot of people can't afford to buy art, and so AI seems like a godsend. And I think
not everyone's John Harper, where you could do the incredible design yourself and the rules,
Yeah, we're not all polyglots like John, but I think the indie community was really quick to self-police and drive those people out and make examples of them. And so it's ended up, I think, within what I've seen, that folks who are buying indie RPGs and like the map making software are just folks who are sympathetic or evangelists themselves. It's sort of like NFTs, like within like about 6 to 8 months to a year, they were just buying and selling to each other. They have captured all of the audience they could, because everyone else went, I see the snake oil, I will not buy any of it.
I mean, this is something that I have grappled with. Like Matt and I, we published a few things. We do write and design RPG elements. We have paid for art. We like to pay for art.
Mm-hmm.
I never really seriously considered using Gen AI, but it I had a curiosity. Adobe's system, Firefly, they have paid the artists, probably not very much, but they have paid them for those images. So, a part of me went, is this ethical? Do I want to do this? This is me personally. I just don't like the way any of it looks. Like I spent a lot of time trying to see if would it be worth generating something for my home game just to have an image. But not only can it not really, like we said, it can't actually do anything new. So if I'm trying to, if the problem I have is I need an image of something unique, that can't really do that. And two, it all looks the same. I just don't like the way that it looks. And
yeah, I
don't know, maybe this is a problem that it can fix, but I've not seen a widespread adoption or even an attempt since, like you said, since, the first wave. I think, because one, people don't like it. It makes them angry. You risk a lot of backlash. And two, it just doesn't look very good. I just think it looks very good. Maybe this is an aesthetic thing. I don't know. Maybe some people like it, but I just think it looks very bad.
There was one case that I can recall, and I reported on it back in 2023, early 2023, whenever I was still writing over at Dicebreaker, that about a game, Zone RPG by Raf D'Amico, which was a card-based, sort of Annihilation-esque, where you're going into this weird zone where reality begins to break apart. And
I love going into zones.
I do love going into zones.
Yeah.
Zones are always safe and good and a great time. Nothing bad ever happens in a place called the Zone.
Yeah.
But in talking to him, he was curious. This was early on in this sort of the wave of sort of going mainstream, where we were starting to see these articles going, could AI be all right? We were not yet in the sort of shove it in your face mode. And Raf was interested in using AI to create the art for the cards, because the hallucinations, that sort of weird amalgamated art style, seemed just sort of, it hit the uncanny valley, which is what he wanted for the sort of vibe of his game. Reality, or some sort of alternate reality, was trying to mirror our world and was doing it imperfectly. And so for him, it fit well. But he was trying to go about it in as ethical a way as he could. He got with some folks to create a large language model that only put attributed work in. Part of the money from the game that he raised was going to go towards the artist who put that work in. And even then, even using that, he got enough criticism from alpha players and people within the community that he eventually backed off and said, in the final product that went to Kickstarter, I'm getting artwork. I'm contracting artwork from artists that can do this for me. And they did it well, and they got paid directly. So even him, who was trying his best at every step, was giving ground.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Even then, he was it just wasn't worth it. And at the end, he said, I made a game I was proud of. Artists got paid. People love the game. It's been successful. I didn't need AI.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting, because the only interest or delight I have felt from AI images has been when they create, mostly unintentionally, insane, surrealist, unsettling, uncanny valley images, which it is very good at. It creates some true nightmare fuel. That is a really interesting idea, but it also it makes sense that in the end, using actual artists would still produce a more reliable product.
In going through these indie games that did use AI art, I did find one thing that I found this statement to be absolutely insane. And Rob, you can cut this whole section if you want, but I would love to quote it for the two of you, because I can't imagine that either of you have read it. So this is from the front of an indie game, which I will not name, that was published on DriveThruRPG. A note regarding the use of AI art. Only the public domain works of deceased classical artists were curated to derive the AI art in this book. The total body that these artists produce in their lifetimes, with regard to this specific book's subject matter, was not sufficient to populate every page. Thus, to both meet our image quota and ensure a cohesive look for the book, specific prompts were used to reproduce their artistic style. It would have been nearly impossible to commission the number of images at the skill level needed from living artists without paying millions of dollars and waiting many more years for completion. It took Michelangelo 4 years to paint the Sistine Chapel. If he were alive today, his services would be cost prohibitive, and the body of work in this book would be complete in approximately 1,200 years. years. It is not our intention to use AI to replace modern living artists, but AI can be a valuable tool for use in niche indie products like this one.
Incredible. I don't know where to start with that.
You're right. That was insane. Wow. Incredible.
Yeah,
I'm proud to be a grave robber.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I just steal from the dead. It's fine. It's morally fine.
That's right.
Also, for my indie RPG, I need to commission people to paint with oil.
Yeah,
and only the most famous artist in the world, in Florence,
yes,
in the
art
world.
For our indie RPG is going to be of a quality akin to Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel.
Also,
yes, of course,
I don't
that's
believe
very normal.
All 3 books of the new D&D books spent millions of dollars on their art. There's
no way.
There's no way. I would say 6 figures. It's not going to be 7 figures.
This is part of the whole. Sorry, this is part of it. Like you can tell. I'm going to go off here for a second because it makes me so angry. You can tell that the suits, that the money guys are so fucking excited to get rid of creatives because writers, artists, we're cheap. We are really cheap. Across the industry, like everybody works for less than they're worth, and they don't get there's freelancers and even people in-house. Nobody gets paid what they're worth who does like writing or art for any industry, but especially not TTRPGs. So like the excitement around replacing those people, especially in tabletop, but anywhere, is just like it reveals how much the money guys resent the creatives and want to be done with them. They want to dispense with people who do art or writing for a living in any way, shape, or form. With so many things, there is a profit to be had, but I think a big driving element behind AI and AI implementations is ideological. Is just they don't like. They don't like the people who make the art, and they want to get rid of them and replace them with subservient, obedient robots.
Yeah, I think just this week, a few days ago, Lionsgate, the film
that's right.
production
I forgot
studio.
all about that.
Yeah, like who's the guy who runs that? Anyway, their CEO came out and was just like, yeah, if we could replace all of our sort of like screenwriters and other writers and creatives with AI, we absolutely would. Do you know how much it costs to blow stuff up? We would love an AI to do that instead. That'd save us I think he was quoted. That would save us millions and millions of dollars on every film. It's just legitimately, nakedly what they want to do. There's no sort of like hidden playbook. It's not the old sort of like weird conservative cabal like pulling the strings. They just nakedly want to do it. They're out there and they are not scared to say it.
First they came for squibs. Next they came for actors.
Right. Bring us back our squibs.
Just don't let Alec Baldwin near them.
That's right.
Right. Well, Chase, I would not know a single lick of this story as it's developed over the last year were I not a subscriber to rascal.news, where for just $50 a year, I have read all your wonderful reporting on this and the rest of the team's reporting on tabletop developments, culture, actual plays, all the cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that very easy sell. You said everything I don't need to. But yeah, thank you. I really do appreciate the support because we are a worker-owned, subscription-based site. We only get money from subscriptions, no advertising, definitely no venture capitalism, none of that sweet unicorn investment. So yeah, so
just,
every subscription
AI writing some of the articles, correct?
Yeah, just some of the stuff. No, yeah,
of course.
Yeah, none of that stuff. But yeah, no. Thank you. So yes, you can go to Rascal and subscribe. It's just rascal.news. And we have like 3 different tiers. And if you're like tight on money, which I totally understand, most of our articles that are paid, we try to put out like free work every week. So there's always something to read. But all of our paid articles, also you can purchase them for $1 an article and just read there. So if you just like are interested in reading whenever I get angry at Chris Cox, $1 every week or so. And I hope it's no more often than that.
This is actually aside as a about journalism. I often wish I could just give $1. Like if I'm trying to read something in, a local newspaper that's interesting, I don't want to subscribe to the, Indianapolis, whatever, but I would happily give $1 to read that single article. It's a nice system. I appreciate it. So yes, please subscribe to rascal.news.
Link in the show notes.
Chase, any like final thoughts before we let you go? Thanks so much for coming on and talking with us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm going to continue reading and writing about this, so you don't have to. So you don't have to do that hard
Thank
work. Yeah, it's very strange. I don't think people need to be extremely alarmed about AI and RPGs quite yet. Hasbro is really the only company doing it, and they were going to do it anyway, and it might not pan out. But as I wrote in my latest article last week, people are doing a really good job of protecting artists and creatives, but I think we need to bring that same fire to the rest of the staff and workers that help a company run, because they're going to get replaced the same as everyone else. And it's just not sexy to go on Twitter and try to protect the people who don't make beautiful illustrations. Yeah. Their jobs, their labor is also important. So let's keep that fire going for every worker.
Well said.
Well said.
Solidarity. And listeners, thanks for listening to our show. I promise you the next time we talk about AI, it will be the Adventure Gradient Descent for Mothership and not about Hasbro.
That's right.
Yes.
Damn, I wish I could be on for that episode. That would have been a lot more fun.
Hey, you're welcome back.
We'll have you on for a fun one soon, Chase. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we won't all be bad news.
If you have questions for us or other things you want to hear us discuss, just drop us a line at dmofnone@gmail.com, or you can join our Discord, link in the show notes.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and keep rolling them dice.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or